director at the Club for Growth, Doug Sachtleben. Also with us, Democratic media strategist Franco Ripple. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
All right, Doug, there's been a lot of talk about this, including Trump backer and former Alaskan Governor Sarah Palin. She called it voter shaming. That's kind of the catchphrase that people are using for it. With these violation-type looking mailers, I mean, mailers can get a little ridiculous, let's be honest, but do you see any kind of violation here? Is that an accurate description, though, voter shaming?
John, you said it. There's nothing illegal about this. They clearly say on them paid for by the Cruz for President campaign. Any of us who've gone to the polls, who have voted over time, know that our mailboxes fill up when it gets to be close to election time. And most of the mailings are not attractive. They're not the kind of things that we want to save and keep around. They're generally negative in nature. This is a get out the vote effort, and a strong one perhaps, and one that maybe comes with a little bit of risk involved in that it's just a general sort of push people to get out to vote, but certainly nothing that crosses any legal boundaries.
Well, Franco, what do you think about this strategy? Is it something that you would ever try with one of your clients?
Absolutely not for a second. And as someone who's been involved in putting together a lot of political advertising over the years, there is a concept of public pressure that you try to, or social pressure, I should say, you try to imply to people, your neighbors are voting, your friends and family are voting, they're voting for this person, you should too. And that's a very effective strategy that's employed on a lot of winning campaigns. This crosses the line. This goes way too far. And frankly, I would say that if a Democrat had done it, for the state secretary of state to come out and ridicule it the way he has, not only that person, but also the political scientist that the Cruz campaign touts as the person behind a lot of their strategy, or that they read a lot, came out and said they straight up made up these numbers that are on these flyers. It's a bad strategy.
But apparently he's not the only one using this strategy. Here's Cruz's surrogate Congressman Steve King talking about the mailers on CNN this morning. King says Rubio is doing the same thing.
If it was a violation, I think the Secretary of State would have said so. And we also know that Marco Rubio has an almost identical document that's been mailed out there, another one of those shaming documents, and we're still waiting for the Secretary of State to issue a similar statement. So, no, politics couldn't play a part at all in this going on here in Iowa.
You think the Secretary of State is anti-Cruz?
I don't know that. I just think that if he was going to put out a statement like that, if that was his professional opinion, he has an obligation to do the same thing when Marco Rubio has a similar document out.
You may have a point there. You can see it. There it is right there on your screen. Doug, what do you think? Is Rubio getting preferential treatment over Cruz?
Well, I don't think anybody in the Branstad administration, the Secretary of State there in Iowa, is going to be a fan of Ted Cruz. I mean, we've seen that there's been a real agenda against Ted Cruz, largely because of his stand on ethanol, the governor coming out more publicly than he ever has before. And no surprise that the Secretary of State is also against Ted Cruz. And I think it's worth noting, too, that this is not unprecedented. These kinds of mailers, you could go back to the Obama re-election campaign in 2012 and see that MoveOn.org sent out, here is your voter report card that tells how you're an excellent voter and your neighbors not so much. So it's not an unprecedented idea. It comes, again, like I said, with some risk as to what you trigger in responses in people, how they take it. But certainly it's an acceptable way of trying to get voters to turn out.
Franco, in your opinion, do you think that Iowa is a must-win for Cruz?
I don't know if it rises to the level of a must-win. I think that he's actually blown it in the expectation game a little bit. Marco Rubio has done a much better job saying for the last several weeks, hey guys, we're going to come in a pretty commanding third place. And that looks to be about where he's going to come in third place, according to some widely respected pollsters. But Cruz has been going out there saying, we're going to win, we've got the momentum. And yet he looks like he's destined for a close second place, but in the game of political expectations, that's blowing it. And I want to go back for just a second to say a big difference between...
All right, just a second. Just a second. Go ahead, Franco.
A big difference between President Obama's mailers and Marco Rubio's mailers is that neither of those pretended to be an official document. And I think, frankly, the Iowa Secretary of State should consider whether this was perhaps falsifying an official document.
Might be too late for that. But, Doug, let me ask you a follow-up question. You know, what is worse for the respective candidate? A second-place win for Cruz or a third-place finish for Marco Rubio, but a distant third place?
I think a distant third place would be difficult. I think for any of them, the expectations game, I agree with Franco. I think Marco's probably played it the best at this point. I think Trump is the one who's probably played his hand the most risky in the sense of making it clear that he plans to win Iowa and has no idea of a second place, no consideration for that whatsoever. So if Cruz does beat him, I think that would be a bit of a stunner for Trump. But I do think Rubio's in a good place, particularly if he closes, as some of the polls seem to indicate, and is close to second or even makes a run at second place.
And we'll see which candidate can use tonight to build momentum towards New Hampshire and South Carolina and beyond. So we talked about the Republican side. Gentlemen, stick around. We're going to talk much more about strategy in the Iowa caucuses. They have been unpredictable, of course, in the past, but talking about must-wins, what about these two right here, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders? Is tonight a must-win for either one of those candidates? We'll take a look at their closing strategies coming up with Doug Sachtleben and Franco Ripple right after this. Plus, there's still time for you to reach out to us. What do you think? Who's going to win tonight in the Hawkeye State? Tweet us your comments at Newsmax Now or newsmax.com/comments. We're coming right back. Welcome back. Last round we talked about Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, a little bit about Marco Rubio, too. Let's talk about the frontrunners now on the Democratic side. Scenes from earlier today, Hillary Clinton delivering donuts to volunteers working to drum support in the hours leading up to the Iowa caucuses. At her campaign headquarters, also Bernie Sanders thanked his supporters and campaign volunteers at a campaign office in Des Moines. But last night, Sanders made his last speech before the Iowans cast their votes for the caucuses. He talked about Hillary Clinton's super PAC raising tens of millions of dollars for her campaign, and he highlighted the fact that there is no pro-Sanders super PAC.
This is so unbelievable. Never in a million years would I have thought this possible. We have received up to now 3.2 million individual contributions. And that is more contributions than any candidate up until this point in a campaign in the history of the United States of America.
That's right, including Barack Obama in 2008. Clinton is actually telling people today that Sanders has been running a very negative campaign, which is kind of ridiculous when you've been looking at what's been going on. Meanwhile, she's still answering questions about her email on the day caucus goers again head to their locations to pick a winner in Iowa.
This doesn't change anything about the fundamental facts. I never sent or received any email marked classified. I take classified information very seriously. And this is an interagency dispute, and it's playing out in public, and I want it resolved.
Which campaign would you rather be? Clinton also talked about the importance of gun control and rallied against Wall Street, a sign that she feels vulnerable to Sanders on that issue. Rejoining us for our roundtable, communications director at the Club for Growth, Doug Sachtleben, also with us, Democratic media strategist Franco Ripple. All right, Doug, Bernie Sanders, has he missed an opportunity not to go after Hillary Clinton a lot stronger on these emails over the last couple of days?
Well, clearly his strategy has worked to close on her as he did, but I think a lot of people were curious at that debate when he sort of just offhanded just put this, seemingly tried to put it to rest, this email issue, when I think most of us understood that this was going to be an ongoing investigation. You would have expected him to do more. But by the same token, now in 3 months' time, the Iowa polling has closed from a 30-point lead for Hillary down to about a 3 or 4 point race. So clearly whatever Bernie's saying to that Democrat crowd in Iowa, they're listening and it's resonating.
It's resonating. Will it be enough to put him over the top, though, Franco? It seems like, and it's very honorable of Bernie Sanders not to go there, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's about winning. Is he looking a gift horse in the mouth?
Well, it was the honorable thing to do. And unlike the Republican debates, which with or without Trump just turned into a slugfest of ad hominem attacks, Democratic debates tend to be about policy and.
We're not talking about the debates, though. We're talking about the closing arguments. There's been new information that's come out since Friday, and if he really wants to win, shouldn't he not be bringing this up?
No, I understand. The reason I bring up the debates is to say that the distinction between the parties is that ours is the one of substance and policy, and that this manufactured issue is a distraction from what Americans really want to talk about. I believe when Hillary Clinton goes on the trail and talks with real voters, they don't talk about her emails. They talk about, how are you going to help me afford to send my kids to college? How am I going to get affordable health care? If I've lost my job, how am I going to be retrained for a 21st century job and not go back to the 20th century? That's what they're talking about, and that's why he put this to bed as nothing more than a distraction.
But don't you think, and I just want to ask you this real quick, Franco, don't you think, though, and I understand that Republicans and Democrats view this very differently, but it has kind of cast a little bit of a shadow over her, where people kind of not sure whether or not to trust her, or they think that she acts like she's above everyone else. Maybe not that she did anything illegally. Are Democrats concerned about that all?
Not the Democrats I'm talking to, and frankly, that includes friends in both campaigns, Sanders and Clinton campaigns. The truth is, all of this hullabaloo about her being untrustworthy seems to exist only in a Republican political and media bubble. When you consider that this is a person, it's no wonder that Republicans don't want to run against her in a general election, because you're looking at someone who, besides her history of statesmanship here in America, for 20 plus years has been in polling the most widely respected woman in the world. I wouldn't want to run against her either if I were Republican. So clearly the smear tactics and the campaign against her began long ago.
Let me ask you this, Doug. Who do you think needs this most? Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton when it comes to Iowa?
Oh, I think Hillary by a long shot. You go back 8 years ago, and this was a dramatic turning point for her in a race that she thought again was going to be one for her to inherit, and Barack Obama defeated her. And if that happens again tonight, I think that would be a stunning upset. That would be a real blow to the followers of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on Newsmax Now. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And just ahead, we talked about the final push for Iowa, but how reliable is the Hawkeye State at predicting future presidents? The answer when we come back. Plus, we have a poll going on right now at Newsmax.com. We want to know who you would prefer as the GOP nominee. Let us know. Cast your vote today. You're watching Newsmax.